these classes, the dot items here, you'll see it just gets assumed. It's going to be a dot with, a div with that kind of class attached to it. You'll see some of these classes are very, if you're familiar with Bootstrap, very Bootstrap-ish. Is that a word? Can we make that an adjective? I think Bootstrap is popular enough that could be added to the dictionary.
I think so too. I mean, they've added a few other words this year that were
a little crazy,
like selfie, maybe.
Yeah, great. And that's what we all need. Let's put that right next to my carousel rant. So you start to see, like, you got the columns, you got things like that a little bit, and we'll talk way more about Bootstrap in that sense. And we're also adding in, another JavaScript here, index.js. So very, very basic templates that's, kind of being put out for the page. We've got a footer at the bottom. You can start to see how things are being named in terms of whether it's their ID or whether you're seeing classes, that kind of thing. So very, very simple way to get started and to get running. There's not too much that we have going on here, really, when we think about it, because all we've got here is we've got a div, we got another div in it that's a container fluid, means it's going to be like 100%. It's just going to take up the space that it's within. And then we've got a title, and we have this little variable here, messages, right? Or sorry, this ID messages, which, I'm assuming if I know nothing about what you've done in your application, which is probably a safe assumption for me for most things, I have no idea, I'm just going to deduce. I'm going to deduce here that something's going to be put in there, and then it's going to be the messages of some sort.
That's right. So just to add a little bit more clarification, so the block content, that will go inside the block content in the layout.j. Is that correct?
So right here.
Okay, so if you see this entire block of content is going to be inserted into layout when it gets all rendered together as one HTML page.
Right.
Awesome.
And so, I don't know, is there anything else you want to point out in terms of what's going on in the index Jade file or anything else? Because for me, I look at this, and even if I didn't know what a Jade template did or how it got rendered or any of those kind of things, I can at least look at this a little bit and see a little bit of the hierarchy. I can see a little bit of where things are going to lie, just, from the classes, for example. Mm-hmm. I can see at the bottom here, we've got a footer, and it's going to be a fluid container. And then, once again, we've got some more markup happening. A lot of it's relating to Bootstrap. And you'll see we have an input, so I'm assuming this is where we're just going to input some text, right, and figure out what that text is. And then, we've got a send button. So we've got the very basics of, I would say, the HTML markup, right, or the structure that's kind of working out of place here. And, that's kind of just one aspect of where that should go, because in this page, if we look at this, we added some behavior, right? If it's JavaScript, there's going to be some kind of something going on there. So if we walk into JavaScript just out of curiosity to see what's going on, and again, this is how I would approach just pulling down a project. I'd probably go through every single thing and figure out where stuff maps, where stuff's being called for, why is it being included. And so if I'm going to look at the JavaScript index for this template, it's going to be pulled out of public. And in public, there's 3 folders. We've got CSS, fonts, JavaScript. Again, in your public folder, you can have whatever structure you want. And we're looking at JS, where we've put the Bootstrap and we've put index.js. And I can start to see what's going on here. Now, that's one of the things about using, HTML and using jQuery, for example, is that by looking at those templates, I have no idea of the behavior of that page. I don't know if someone's clicking something. I don't know if things are being rendered over and over again. So, I need to go and find out if there is any behavior happening and what's actually happening. So when I open up the index.js, which was linked to from this template right here, I can see, okay, there's some stuff that's going on. And, if you know even just a little bit of jQuery, it's most often used for DOM manipulation, capturing events, and I'd say animation. And so I can see there's a send message button right here, and it's looking for that item. So, okay, it's going to capture something on that item. If I go back to the index, I can find that item just by looking here. So I can see these, see it starting to be mapped a little bit in terms of behavior. And so what we're doing here is we're capturing that send message button, and we're capturing the click function, right? And so again, that whole event-based system, we're going to capture the click on it, and we're going to do a variety of things. So, in theory, it's a chat application. If someone hits submit or they have that send message button, we're going to take what was in the input field and we're going to send that, right? And so you can start to see right at the beginning, there's a variable that references socket. So it's, equal to IO, which is a library that we included previously. We included it in layout. So that's going to be, available to anyone who extends layout. And so we create a reference to the socket IO, and then what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the stuff again, because I don't know what kind of message you're gonna send. So we're grabbing the value from the input, and what we're doing is we're gonna emit that to chat. So basically that channel that we created that was all about the chat channel, and we're sending that message so that everyone gets that message. And then we're appending, again, there's that messages ID, and we're appending that message to it. And then you can see that, we've got emptying out the value of that original input field. So you input something, you hit send, and then it's going to append it, and then, basically it's going to empty out your input so that you can do it again. Now, going back to the socket IO bit a little here, I might have jumped ahead because we could do a little bit of the bootstrap, but you can just see, and we'll explain this a little bit of just connecting things from the front end to the back end. This is me jumping ahead. I just want to get everything done. Just throw it down and get it done. But you'll see that we're capturing the chat, and then we're going to append messages. So going back to the templating a little bit, we included Bootstrap here, and so what we're going to do is we're also going to talk a little bit about Bootstrap and why we're using it here. Do we need to use it? Do we not? So we're going to talk just a bit about Bootstrap and the beauty of Bootstrap, really. I think there could be they did do a whole day on the beauty of Bootstrap. So we're going to talk about implementing Bootstrap. And so when it comes to Bootstrap, if you don't know who Bootstrap is, I think we previously said it was the #1 project on GitHub, right?
Yeah, it's right. the #1 project. Extremely popular.
Yeah.
Extremely popular.
Like all sites look the same almost now.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right?
Like if you're looking to create a very simple site.
I feel bad. It's like Stacy's rant day. Okay, tabbing in on Jade templates, carousels, and now we have every site looks like Bootstrap.
Yeah, and that's because everyone does use Bootstrap. It's so popular.
Yeah.
It's one of the most popular projects on GitHub. Think about it, like there's thousands of contributors to the project. Like thousands of people are adding things to the project. Like it's huge amount of modules that are added, sort of like independent ones that you can add to your own Bootstrap. Mm-hmm. There's even Bootstrap themes. So
yeah, saw those.
All of those, I don't know why people just use the default Bootstrap theme, but you could use basically a theme that will change it completely and look not like none of the other Bootstrap sites that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's very familiar. It's very similar to WordPress themes almost,
exactly.
Where you're starting off those things. And so I used one for a site, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this is going to, make a difference. And I looked, oh, yeah, okay. And then I, tailored it a little bit. But, Bootstrap is one of those things that I think was originally created by Twitter, people at Twitter.
Yeah.
Right? 2
developers at Twitter.
Yep.
They were using it to unify their internal tool styling. So all their internal tools, they all had different CSS styling for each one.
Yeah.
They created one framework that sort of unifies that styling across the board. And the amazing thing is when they open sourced it, it just exploded in popularity. It was just amazing to watch that growth. It was just fantastic.
I know everyone loves it. And the thing about Bootstrap is it handles a lot of things for you. So it gives you a lot of scaffolding in terms of CSS. So if you're building anything that's, and if you're not at this point, it's kind of like at some point you're going to have to immediately in the future, is responsive sites, building for various devices. And so it solves a lot of, I wouldn't say it solves the problems, it does a lot of work for you. And so it gives you a lot of the kind of CSS scaffolding in terms of all the styles you need to create fluid containers, to make sure they stack one on top of the other, so you don't have to worry about clear fixes or any of that kind of stuff. It handles a lot of those kind of situations for you, but it also, depending on how much you use from Bootstrap, provides you with a lot of behavior. And so I like to separate things in terms of, presentation and behavior. And so presentation would be CSS, and then behavior would be JavaScript. So it gives you a lot of behavior. So if you implement it properly, you're going to get, and if you download the JavaScript and what you need, you can get things like the carousel, which we all love, drop-down navs, right? Buttons that work in certain ways. You can get all the styling on input fields, those kind of things that you might need in terms of styling or in terms of behavior. And so a lot of people really do kind of flock to Bootstrap because it's very easy to use, the learning curve's not that big, and it gives you so much out of the box, and it saves you so much time, especially if you are developing for devices with various resolutions and sizes. So, it's one of those things that a lot of people have been using. And it just accounts for all the common kind of functionality and layout needs that you might need. Now, you can also go to Bootstrap and, it has its own defaults. Everyone loves their own defaults. And so it definitely has its own font defaults. It has its own colors that it likes, those kind of things. You can go, and even the grid. So, anytime you're working with CSS and you're worrying about sizes of elements, sizes of containers, that kind of thing, we call it basically your grid. And so, you can go and customize all those things. So if you decide, I'm not going to work with 960 grid, or I'm not going to work with a, 1280 or whatever it may be, you can customize it. You can put in your own gutters and your own sizes and all that stuff. You can customize the defaults for the colors. You can customize all of that kind of stuff. Even if you're going to implement a font that's going to be kind of like your base underlying font, you can customize those things. And so to get Bootstrap, it's pretty simple. You just go to http://getbootstrap.com. Right? And then to customize it, you go getbootstrap.com/customize. Now, if you are really going to kind of stray away from the defaults and really make your own defaults, it's worth customizing it, because otherwise you got to go in and override everything. And that can be, it can be a little, it can be annoying, I'm not going to lie. But, you spend the time customizing it, and that way you don't need to worry about it. And so that way you got your font sizes and your colors and your palettes and all those things that you need. The other thing to note about Bootstrap is that you can kind of choose whether or not you're going to, if you use a preprocessor. So a preprocessor is, the ability to kind of write your CSS in a little bit more of an object-oriented fashion, and it gets compiled down to CSS. And so you can choose if you want to use, and these are two of the most popular ones, less or Sass. And so once again, if you haven't checked out preprocessors, check out less or Sass. You'll start to see the kind of functionality they afford you in terms of, allowing you to reduce how much code you're writing in CSS. So having variables, having functions for things that you do again and again, like I need rounded corners with all vendor prefixes, those kind of things. So, Bootstrap allows you to kind of utilize those workflows. To implement Bootstrap, as soon as you've downloaded it and you have it going, again, it's basically taking those files. So you're always going to get the CSS, and there's a JavaScript. And once again, you can go and customize and say, okay, I want this functionality from the JavaScript and not this. Maybe you need only one or two things. You don't want it all if you're not going to use it all. You want to keep your footprint really low. So you can go and customize it, download it, and then it's as simple as including the JavaScript and including the CSS, which we saw. So let's go just into what we have. And if you take a look at, it should be in our layouts, you'll see that we have downloaded Bootstrap and we are using the minified version. Now, again, it's up to you, and it depends on what how you work and what your environment's like. You might not want the minified version. You can always get the non-minified version. It might be easier to read. Again, and you can do pretty print basically in some of the tool sets now, which will take the minified and make it more readable if you need to do that. Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you're using something and an error comes up and you don't know where it's coming from, and you've got to read a library that's just not yours. But for the sake of this, we've used the minified versions, and what we've done is we've downloaded it, and when you download Bootstrap, it kind of comes in its own file structure of how they think it should work. And we've just kind of, rejigged it and put it in the file structure that works for us and put it in the public folder. Again, anything that you're doing client side needs to go in the public folder. And if for no other reason, you just got to remind yourself that because you are writing JavaScript on client side and on server side, you want to make sure that you have a very, very huge distinction of which is the client side JavaScript. Once you start opening up files and you're just looking at the tabs, it's really easy to become confused. So making sure that you just reference everything in the public folder like that makes a lot of sense. And so we have Bootstrap. We have it also minified. We're using the minified version. And we've included the CSS. And then what you do is you include the Bootstrap CSS first, and then you include yours, because you might want to override some of their settings. You might want to add on to it. Chances are you're going to use this kind of as your foundation, and then you might have custom styles for other things. So you include any of your style sheets after, so that you make sure that you're getting all the benefits of what they're doing. A couple other things that Bootstrap does for you that we don't really mention here, but a lot of the things is, using Bootstrap, you're kind of normalizing your browsers in terms of CSS too. So, setting some defaults and things like that. You're going to chime in.
Yeah.
Saya,
So
you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's funny. I raise my hand. It's like I'm in class. Whenever Stacey starts going through her teaching mode, I just have to sit down and listen and raise my hand every time. But I did want to ask you. Let's say that I have my index.jade and I want to add a CSS file just for that folder, just for that template. What would you suggest I do to my my layout?
I would probably end up doing the same thing that you did for your script in terms of a block where that you can replace it. And so I'd put a block for somewhere in the links in case you need to do that and replace that content. I don't know. You tell me if I'm right or not.
Actually, I think I agree with you. I mean, if it worked for JavaScript, it will work
wait,
for,
hold on. That wasn't a lot. You didn't give me a lot of I don't know, what's the word? I can't think of the word. Confidence. That's the word. There was not a lot of confidence. You're like, yeah, I think I would do that. Whatevs. So looking at that kind of thing, you can see how you just included. And then if we look at if you look at our layouts, I'm going to kind of stay away from just layout.jade because we know that we're implementing those items, and you'll see that we've implemented it. But if we look at index, you'll see that, if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, you can look at anyone's HTML and you can be like, they are using Bootstrap because I can recognize the class names. Now, I don't know exactly when Bootstrap did it. They kind of changed their format for class names because they used to have span 4, span whatever. And now you'll see a column extra small 4, all these different things. So at some point, they did change the taxonomy of their classes. So you have to watch for that. However, you'll start to see that it will give you, we're using a lot of things from Bootstrap in terms of the classes. So, the idea of a fluid container, right? A container that you have that's going to be fluid and it's going to be 100%. We have the idea of a row. So you got to think of things in terms of row and columns, right? When it comes to that scaffolding for layout in Bootstrap. And so, you'll have a row, and in that row, you're going to have columns. And then the next row, obviously, will go under the previous row. So it's that idea of rows and columns. And those column sizes are based very much on your grid default settings or what you customized. So, if you're looking at something that's like column, you'll see col dash XS dash 8, that will be be a certain number in relationship to your grid. And that's the thing about responsive design. Everything is really starts off with that number where you're saying, I'm working with a grid like this, or maybe it's truly 100%. And everything within it becomes a percentage of that. And that's how you get that fluidity. So did I say that right? Fluidity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better than how I say modularize.
High fives. Got to high five myself. I need a little high five thing here. Can you put up a hand?
You a real high five.
Don't leave me hanging. That was weak. Oh my God, don't leave me hanging. So you start to see, a lot of those things, and you'll start to see the columns, and once again, look up on Bootstrap, just read up a little bit about it. Worst comes to worst, start playing with the numbers and just see what they do. Because, they basically columns and sizes, they go from, like 1 to 12. So you can kind of just go through and start playing with those items and seeing, oh, this makes the size this much bigger and this. And, Bootstrap has so much stuff in terms of it. But it also, not just layout, it has also if you define things with certain names, and if you include the JavaScript and whatnot, it has certain behaviors that it's looking for. So when the JavaScript, when you include it, it will go through the DOM and it will look for those items. And it will say, oh, it has these classes. And you can get certain behavior with certain things as well. You'll see a lot of things when it comes to Bootstrap. You'll see, for example, we have BTN as a button class, and then BTN primary, and then it's also a BTN large. And they're just using multiple classes so that you can kind of add on behavior behavior in terms of presentation, like what it should look like in multiple places. So you can be like, this is a button. Okay, it's also a primary button, so it's going to look like this, right? As opposed to a non-primary button. This is a large button, so the size is going to be bigger, and those kind of things. So when it comes to, using Bootstrap, I mean, again, there is a reason why there was a whole MVA on Bootstrap, because it can be a beast. It can also be something you can use very, very quickly to get up and running. Is there anything you want to add on Bootstrap?
I think it's awesome. It's definitely an awesome CSS framework. It's the only one that I use.
You sound like my 12-year-old nephew. It's awesome. I love it.
I get excited.
It's awesome.
Before I used to struggle. I used to struggle with CSS. Simply because I didn't have this big library that I could just reference that had all this stuff that I usually use. It was just all my sites looked like these basic websites that maybe have nothing special about them. Right? And now with Bootstrap, I just stick Bootstrap right in, and immediately I have something that looks decent, at least semi-decent enough that I can put it on the web and not be embarrassed.
Yeah, not hide away in shame.
Exactly.
Yeah, programmer
fall
shame.
in tears.
I think that's programmer shame, where you're like, is it Comic Sans and lime green? Yes. But it is. It's one of those things where, and that's what I think a lot of people say about Bootstrap. You throw it in, and it makes stuff look, okay, it looks good, it looks acceptable, it looks acceptable to everyone, and that's the difference. Because sometimes as a developer, and I hate to be like this, but sometimes, you're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, it works, and that's what we were focused on, and that's okay. You meet a designer, and they look at it, and they're like, oh, I don't care if it works, it just doesn't even look right. And so you kind of match both of those things. So, very quick kind of glossing over, Bootstrap. Again, like I mentioned, there is an MVA just on Bootstrap. We went over some Jade templating. We showed you some examples. We showed you how it's used in the project. And so for the next module, we're actually going to take that front end, right, smash that back end together and make things work. Because, otherwise we're just kind of looking at this stuff.
Otherwise, exactly.
Yeah, we need things to work.
We need things to be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that word, and you might hear a lot more of it now that it's stuck in my head.
More awesome.
More awesome.
More awesome.
We need more awesome.
Oh yeah, cake! I got cake. Today's the best day ever. I never know what to do. This is so good. Yum, yum, yum. We're gonna take a 10-minute break with some cake. It's no longer here. It's okay, it went away, I ate it already. And then we'll see you back for the next module, which we're gonna talk about, working front end and back end. And then after that, we've got deploying and debugging, and that's it. That would be it. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. We're gonna take a break. Welcome back. We're at the 5th module. Again, I also thought in the 2nd module that I was going to be eating right away. So we're in the 5th module. We're going to be talking about just kind of finalizing the UI a little bit and connecting what we've done so far in terms of the UI and connecting it to the back end so that you can see how that actually works in terms of, hey, making that UI work, submitting something, and then seeing those messages roll in as you will. So we're going to talk about a couple things in this module. Is again, we're going to talk about adding libraries to the front end. We're going to talk about jQuery socket.io. We're going to cover a little bit of Stylus to show you how that works. We previously mentioned in terms of middleware Stylus compiling down to CSS. So we're going to just point that out and show that. We're going to also talk about, if you're using socket.io and we're working on the front end, how do we listen for messages and how do we send messages? Previously kind of already done this on the back end a little bit, so we're going to look at the front end a little bit here. So we're going to have to add some libraries to make these things work on the client side. And so 2 of the libraries that we're going to be using, and one of them we kind of even just went through and glossed over a little bit, was jQuery. So we're going to look at jQuery, we're going to look at socket.io. You're going to explain that behavior in detail. And we're going to take a look at how can we wire everything up in, from that UI.
All right.
So let's take a look at how do you use those and what does it look like and
yeah, so
behavior.
Yeah, awesome.
There we go again. Awesome. That's 1 point.
Yeah. I think someone in the chat room should keep a track how many times I say awesome. But anyways, so we want to add jQuery to our project. jQuery is this extremely commonly used library for JavaScript front-end development. It lets you...
what year was it created? Do you know?
It must be like before I even started coding.
I honestly, my response is like to be mean and say years ago. I think it was 2006 or 2007, but I don't know. It seems right to me.
Sounds about the time I probably started coding a little bit before then.
Yeah.
I'm not that young.
Coding.
I'm not that young.
Then grew beard.
Well, I like fake coding. Just like, tapping on the screen. I don't know.
T-Rex typing.
T-Rex typing, exactly. Awesome, cool. So, jQuery is this awesome library that lets you turn all the different browser quirks across the different types of browsers out there, and so stabilize the base JavaScript API and the DOM API across all of those different browsers. And it provides you with some really cool functions that you can use to select various elements in a way that's super easy, that's super flexible, and that you can use to create some dynamic websites.
Right. So I think at the beginning when we thought about browsers, non-modern browsers. I don't know what that even means, but
long ago.
So long ago, back in the day, I used to walk 4 miles and use vendor prefixes. But thinking about those kind of things, like it was, how you might have done, a typical AJAX request. One of those kind of things would be different across all the browsers. Some of that behavior stuff was different. So I think it was created originally to, like you said, create a baseline for the behavior and abstract it out. So you had one API into that, and
exactly.
It took care of all the logic behind it.
Yeah, it took care of the little intricate details between different browsers, handled most of the stuff that might have been missing in some browsers as well. Like some DOM APIs might not have been available. jQuery added those missing ones.
Right. DOM manipulation, like accessing an element, adding something to it. It was, and often sometimes, there's still differences between some of the browsers. So it also, people used it a lot for that too.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So it was a great library.
It was.
Sorry, you're right. It was and it is. I was gonna say it still is, but then you jumped right in. I can tell Stacy's a huge fan of jQuery.
No, I think jQuery has started off I think years ago it really. I think it's important to understand why it was created and what it did, and also how maybe that's not as necessary now, but that it still provides a lot of really great functionality in terms of DOM manipulation. I think people use it typically for abstracting that kind of behavior, DOM manipulation, and animation. Right? I think a lot of people use it for those things. Even though we have, CSS3 with all those kind of animations, I think people still use it quite a bit for that, which is totally, in my opinion, great. I think it's awesome to use. I also just think jQuery is not JavaScript. They're not the same, and
yeah,
people
it's true.
kind of...
Some people, there might be a little bit of a confusion when someone asks you, do you know JavaScript, they don't necessarily only mean jQuery.
Right.
Although jQuery is so popular and used and known by so many people. In most cases, a lot of front-end devs might not go deep into